I'm stressed out, so I I figured I'd do a live stream to try to distract myself because I just, there's some things going on. I'm not even going to talk about it. That's the whole point. If I talk about it, I'll just get more stressed. And it doesn't have anything to do with gang stalking. It's just some things I'm dealing with as far as the rental. And I'm not going to really go into that. However, if I do have to leave the live stream suddenly, I'll let you guys know and then they'll come back on later. Oh, boy, it is freezing. I mean, it is so cold, man. It is ridiculous. Last night it got so cold that I had, literally frozen water in the bathroom. I've got the several heaters in here, so I'm trying to get that taken care of right now. But what are you going to do? It is what it is. And it's cold where I live, and you can have some very extreme temperatures. And I can't imagine what it'd be like to be homeless. And I've talked about that before when it comes to being gang stalked. You got to deal with that. You're threatened with it. I've had to live in my vehicle before, and I've had things happen to me in the winter. In fact, when I had to leave that trailer when I got attacked out there, it was in the middle of winter, and it was cold and I had to live in my vehicle. And it was, I mean, who knows what the hell some people out there are dealing with that are being gang stalked in this type of extreme weather. I'm pretty sure it's pretty much everywhere, at least here in the West. So, Techno Kid, hey, how's it going, buddy? So, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I literally have no idea. Usually, I'll maybe write something down. I'll scratch something down on a paper plate or something, but I didn't, and I don't even care. I'm going to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. I've been through a lot. I've been dealing with this labyrinthine group harassment now for a long time, man, a long time, and it's given me a lot of experience. I've had a lot of things that I've seen, a lot of things that I've dealt with, and some of you guys, you only been doing it for years. So if you have any questions, I know there's not that many people out there right now, but put them in the live, and we'll get to it because, like I said, I'm stressed out, and I'm just gonna distract myself with this. It's cold everywhere. Yeah, yes, it is. Techno Kid, Adam. Hey, how you doing? Well, like I said, there's just so many things we could talk about. You could literally pick a topic that targets deal with, whether it's the obvious surveillance, the break-ins, um, the type of tampering and harassment that targeted individuals deal with, the covert, innuendos, all these little games that switch up on the target, whether you're dealing with directed conversations or innuendos. The harassment is everywhere, and targets, they're dealing with that. They have to. Okay, Lisa Grant, how you doing? I'm sorry about that. Sometimes I've noticed too that then it could be some type of issue from the cold weather, or it could be when you have an Android, you get those track phones or Straight Talk or whatever, and they'll your data will literally be messed up towards the end of your service date, which for me it's today. So if it's playing games on you, if there's some buffering, it could be from my end. I have no idea. They do that. It's like a scam. They want you to renew your service quicker so you can get your data. And I haven't even been using those white noise. I figured that's probably what it was. I've been doing a lot of live streams, but you never know. So it could be a lot of things. Techno Kid says I've been living with a suitcase forever. Looking back, probably since age 14. Wow. Yeah, you know what's going on. Adam says, "How about the psychic terror?" That's a good topic. And then Lisa Grant says, "How about just coping skills, continually dealing with the cruelty and the just duplicity?" Well, you can mix those together. That's pretty good. So the psychological terror is definitely a part of gang stalking, and I've talked about that before. When you're dealing with threats and innuendos, with directed conversations, with all these little tactics, people breaking into your house. Um, if somebody just wanted to kill you, you'd probably be dead. But it's all about that psychological terror. They use that as a medium. Okay, whether you're dealing with some type of government thing or whether you're dealing with people who want to use you for coercion to drive you nuts and just basically terrorize you until you start to lose your mind, which is a real simple way of describing gang stalking, you know, along with all the other techniques, because it is scientific. But the psychological terror that Adams brought up, that's part and parcel of this whole thing, man. Without it, they're not going to accomplish it. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's how they get people reprogrammed. That's the first element that is used against targeted individuals. Because, like I said many, 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 many times, okay, when you're attacked, whatever happens to you, it doesn't matter whether somebody breaks into your house or walks up to you and tells you something that nobody should know, or plays a little game with you, or repeats something back to you that you were thinking, or whatever. Because the targets will deal with all that weird stuff, the fear, the terror, the attack. Okay, a lot of things happen when you're dealing with something like that. Okay, it activates different parts of your brain. Um, and it's like getting a chemical tattoo, and all the things that are surrounding your scenario. It doesn't matter whether it was within like a 24-hour period, or right at the time, or right after, or within that 24-hour period that you're attacked. All those things can turn into triggers, and I've referenced different traumatic events before, like 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination, or you could pick whatever that you want. Touching a hot stove. It's the same thing, because everything that is around that, your brain is wired in a way where it's going to try to compartmentalize everything and organize everything in a way where it makes sense. Okay. Because you're experiencing extreme fear and anxiety, and bringing you back to homeostasis is kind of the key, and to use whatever it is that's torturing you as something that's productive. I'm not talking about them or anything else. I'm talking about just the way your brain works is the objective. So, like I said, if you burn yourself on a hot stove, the whole idea is to turn that negative event into something positive so it doesn't happen again, right? And everything around that event is going to be crystal clear in your mind. That memory is burned into your brain. It's like when people experience 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination, they might not remember what they were eating a couple days before that, or what the weather was like, or the songs that were on the radio, or whatever. But everything around that day, they're going to remember it crystal clear. They're going to, I remember the weather was this way, or I remember somebody was cooking, toast, in the apartment building that I was in. I remember that, my mother was baking bread. I remember this song was on the radio, whatever. It's all going to be crystal clear for the rest of their life, because your brain is designed that way. Okay, your amygdala, your hippocampus, all those things are involved when it comes to a traumatic experience, and they know that. So when you're attacked like that, it has reciprocity. So the psychological terror is the fundamental access to you. Okay, and it is necessary. Even when you get into the people that are going to have the altars and the split, and all, which I've dealt with that, by the way. It used to be a lot worse than it is now, but I have that issue. Okay, you can look at it however you want. It's just the way it is. When you've experienced a lot of torture and trauma, And isolation too is a big part of it. You can have that where you're going to split. You're going to have that little child within you. That's going to split off from other little personalities that come out to deal with the scenario that you're looking at. In fact, Dr. Defacto you could probably consider him an alter, technically, if you were going to be technical about it. Okay, to look at things objectively and deal with them rather than to go into the pain and all those things that are associated. Excuse me, with gang stalking. But when that happens, all these things are connected, and they are not only connected to whatever it is. Like people will say, "Well, I saw someone with a headlight out," and I see those things. That's true, and those things are a factor, and that's part of the menagerie that you're in, or the color red, or the white van, or the innuendo, the keyword, the phrase, whatever. But everything is going to be there: smells, colors, all of it. And it's going to be more specific at first, but the whole strategy of repetition concerning gang stalking is going to ingrain this stuff more and more into your brain. So the more attacks you experience, the more time that you experience or that goes by concerning these different attacks. And like I've said before, there's a lot of things that you have to be aware of when you're experiencing these repeated attacks, because that's what they're doing. Okay. They are literally, invading your life. They're invading your mind. They want to give you a type of virus in your brain to where you're paranoid and worrying about things like I've mentioned before. And I made a video called 80%. Okay. Once you're attacked, man, we'll use the example of, we'll use food tampering. Okay. That's a good one. Or even the break-ins or something like that. It can happen one time, and it's going to change your life. It has the potential to do that. Doesn't always happen that way, but even one event can change your life. Like maybe someone is attacked, or they experience, one of those mass shootings, or maybe someone is raped, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. And what happens to people when they get assaulted like that, whether they're physically assaulted or sexually assaulted, and then you see them, they've got two German shepherds, a gun, and hidden around their waistband. They've got another one, open carry, and they've got locks all over their doors. They've got security cameras from one event. It might have only even taken 20 minutes. We'll say they're 35 years old, and now what's happened to them? Their whole life is different, right? They used to walk around. They went, "Oh, I didn't even lock my doors. People are just people." And then you run into some psycho, you run into some damn gang stalkers, some perps, and you're like, whoa. And it's even worse for targets because, in the event of someone being assaulted by a freak or some deviant or something like that, even though it's rare, you run into like a Ted Bundy or a Dennis Rader or something like that, or a Gary Ridgway, and you could say, well, I, as long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that's probably never going to happen again. But it doesn't matter. It still changes that person, and they're scared, and they will do whatever they have to do to make sure that never happens again. Okay, and that's when you deal with targets, dealing with all the locks on their doors and the security cameras and everything else. And I'm like that. Okay, and I know that it was more than one time, but the initial event that got me freaked out was very intense. I had people break into my house, take my clothes off, drug me, and I was even warned about it in advance, and I didn't take it seriously. And I've talked about that before. If you're a targeted individual and people are talking smack to you, if you're a new target, if people are trying to freak you out, or don't blow it off, man. Get some hardware, lock your doors, make sure people cannot get into your windows at night. Take precautions. Don't make it easy. Get a security system if you can afford it, because they'll do whatever they can, whatever they have to get under your skin, to give you that virus, to give you that psychological terror that Adam talked about, because that's the way that they reprogram you. And if it doesn't work the first time, that's okay, because it's guerrilla warfare. It's asymmetrical warfare. You don't know where it's coming from next. That's the best part of it. And the fact that the targeted individual, like in that example I gave when someone is raped or they run into some freak or whatever, well, that's one thing, man. But it's another thing for a target who is being attacked from, a multifaceted, in a multifaceted scenario where it seems like it's coming from everywhere. So there's nowhere, that the target can go to get away. They go on the run. The people, follow them to the hotel or check in, or they're already there banging on the walls. Directed conversations are coming through the wall. And I've heard of it. I've experienced it. Okay. I've done it. I've done it multiple times, man. And it's like, where the hell am I? What the hell is going on? It's a completely different reality. And targets are dealing with all that food tampering or break-ins, so that nothing is safe. And then, of course, the stimuli will change, but it doesn't matter because that's part of the strategy too. So you have the asymmetrical warfare, you have the guerrilla warfare, you have these tactics that are used to invade your mind, and it's all about psychological terror. And all they have to do is do this to you. Like I said, maybe once, twice, three times they can take you on that 2 week onslaught that a lot of targets will talk about. I've heard that from a lot of them. Well, they'll just get hunted down relentlessly for a 2 week period, running for their lives. Not usually they don't even sleep through that 2 weeks. If it's, it can happen longer than that too. Okay. And I've seen that before where targets will deal with that. And the insomnia, the stress, the anxiety, the psychological terror is so intense that they don't even sleep. Okay. They have a hard time eating. All those things are a problem. And it changes their life. And then they don't have to do anything because you don't know. You don't know where it's coming from next. Right. So that's really, the strategy. So after they get that invasion into your brain, they don't really have to do anything. They can sit back and observe you, they can watch you or whatever. And you don't know where it's coming from. You're paranoid, you're having trust issues. You're afraid maybe if you're dealing with the break-ins to keep food in your house, depending on whether you've dealt with the covert poisoning or whatever. When I started dealing with this, I got threatened with that. Okay. And, I was told, by this individual that was hanging around where I lived, eventually they kind of wormed their way in to my life where they, well, do you smoke pot and everything? I'm like, yeah, it was back in my 20s. And supposedly this individual was just, excuse me, hanging around the area. And they evidently worked in the downtown part of the city that I was living in. And they're, yeah, I just come here on my smoke break and whatever. And then this individual's like, well, yeah, I got some pot. Let's smoke some pot. And we went up into my apartment and he's like, yeah, can I look in your fridge? And I'm like, what? What are you thirsty? Are you hungry? What's up with that? No, I just want to look. And I'm like, oh, well, that's weird, but whatever. Here you go. Voila. And the individual starts talking about all the things that can be done to covertly give someone cancer or poison them and kill them and blah, 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 blah. And immediately I thought, this dude is trying to mess with me, right? Okay, which is true. And then, of course, it escalated. And, a little bit longer after that, the individual showed up again. There was more people at my house. And I'm like, I'm being just kind of a smart ass, and I went to the fridge, grabbed something and drank it in front of him, and it pissed him off. And he says, well, when people start doing things to you at night, you're going to notice it. And he said it loud enough for me to hear and some of the other people in the room. And when I confronted him, I said, what? Did I hear what you just said? And I got to go. And he left. Okay. But I heard what he said. And it wasn't long after that I got the break in. I woke up, my clothes were off. I was on some type of a drug. There were two people that I remember leaving the apartment. I could see their backs. They had thrown my comforter up against the wall on their way out of my room. You could see the door to the apartment, and so the comforter is sliding down on the wall, and they opened the door and just slammed it, bam. And of course, the little chain, that was on because it was a chain lock door. It's just kind of, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I remembered everything that was said. I remembered all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is beyond, because they literally went up into a second story apartment and, busted open the window and broke into my house, you know. And at that point on, of course, my life was different. Okay, that was the traumatic invasion. That was the beginning of all the paranoia and psychological terror that Adam is talking about. And that's the invasion. Okay. Getting to what Lisa said, coping skills. Well, all these things are going to freak you out to the point where you're constantly stressed. You're constantly worried. You're going to be trying to figure out what's going on. You have to see the spiritual reality to this stuff. Otherwise, you're not going to really understand what's going on and know that you're dealing with a terror campaign. And at the same time, that you have to take it seriously and try to protect yourself. You have to remember not to go over the edge and do something that's not a solution, because that's really what happens to targets. You can either grind metal to the point where you're literally going to have a nervous breakdown, or you're going to become frustrated and aggressive, or you're going to start talking about this to the wrong person. And there's a lot of different tactics that go along with it. The traumatic invasion, the terror and stuff like that, the beginning of it, that's just the beginning, man. That's not even to illustrate all the other tactics that come into play for targeted individuals who are dealing with this stuff. And there's a lot of them. Okay, I referenced the food tampering or whatever. Well, and now the paranoia is up to a different level. Not only are you might be dealing with people breaking into your house and doing stuff like that. And by the way, later, that individual, because I moved out of that apartment, I figured I didn't know what was going on. I figured it was just a group of people who were jealous of me or whatever, or pissed off, or something. I didn't know what was going on. That was back in the day where I used to lift weights all the time. And, I had dealt with several people that I didn't even know uh, who they were, but evidently their girlfriends were talking about me or whatever. And they were, they were out to get me, and I didn't even know. I got attacked by 15 people in a bar one time because this guy's girlfriend was talking about me. 15 people attacked me, pool cues me, and broke over my head and everything. And I didn't even know what was going on, man. Okay. And, luckily God protected me from that. And I walked out unscathed. I got punched in the face. I don't even know where all the punches were coming from, but it was just because of that. Okay. So I'm thinking all these things. I didn't know what was going on. Later, this guy finds me again in the new place. I went and rented a house on the other side of town. Right. And I even considered getting a gun at that point. And I didn't know. Sorry about that. I just got a notification. And the whole thing was really freaking me out. But this dude found me, and so I'm dealing with him, right? And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to do the right thing as a Christian, and I'm not going to. I could have killed him with my bare hands. Okay, this guy wasn't very, he wasn't like trained in martial arts or wrestling. And I used to wrestle. I wrestled for 15 years. I did martial arts for basically, my whole life. After I was around 10 years old, I started wrestling when I was 5 years old, and I could have killed him with my bare hands. So I'm like, God's gonna, he's gonna take care of this. I'm not gonna worry about it. It was crazy. People were breaking into my house, tampering with my vehicles. This guy shows up, and I'm being nice to him, right? And one day he goes over the edge, and I was just about to the point where I was, because I thought about this. Maybe I should send these people a message and kill this son of a bitch, because I could do it. And I thought of different ways of doing it. And he comes over again, and he's, it's insult to injury at this point. And this is like multiple times I've had to deal with this guy. And he said something to me, and he knew I was going to kill him. He goes, okay, I'm sorry. And he backed up, and he said, somebody paid me to drive you crazy. Somebody paid me a lot of money, and I'm not gonna mess with you anymore. And he even brought up the fact that the stuff that was making me throw up, because I was having a lot of problems, with my digestive system and other things were going on. And he said that they were putting Epicac in my food. And the whole idea of me getting cancer was just a psychological fear campaign. But you don't even know. You don't know that. And there was other things that I was dealing with, like amphetamines. I would wake up. Sometimes these people would be injecting me with something. I caught them over at that house when I moved in out of that first rental. I woke up and literally saw them injecting something into my arm. And they ran out of the house. I mean, you deal with some crazy stuff. How far will they go? It'll go pretty far. Hold on, guys. I'm going to have to turn off my sound for notifications because I've got someone that is. And are you all still there? Okay. Sorry about that. And I'll take that as a time to take a little bit of a break and look and see what's going on in the comments out there, because I haven't even looked at it. Like I said, I'm stressed out today. I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, and I'm just trying to distract myself and make it productive. Nicholas Boserman, welcome to the live stream. I didn't even lock my doors. If someone wants in, they're getting in anyway. Okay, well, okay. Are you talking about before? You better lock your doors now. I wouldn't suggest you make it easy for them at all. Like I said, I've had other things happen. I was sexually assaulted one time as well. I'm not going to go into the details on that, but it was pretty brutal. I've been drugged. I've been assaulted. I've been covertly drugged. I mean, you don't even know. I mean, that was, really the only thing that scared me, other than the fact that I had people breaking into my house. Like I said before, I'm crippled now. A lot of these things have taken a huge toll on my health, to where there was over 2 decades where I didn't sleep right. And other things were going on to the point where I think it just caused my whole body to break down, and I got really bad arthritis and some other things. So now I'm crippled. I'm not, Chuck Norris or whatever, but before I was, before I could have fought three regular guys and beat the shit out of them. Okay, literally. I'm not bragging. Like I said, now that's not really something that I could say, obviously. But before I could do that, and I used to teach people, martial arts, not professionally. I made up my own style. So getting to me and scaring me wasn't easy. Okay, not only that, but I played a lot of psychological games growing up. So if they wouldn't have done those things to me, they wouldn't have gotten to me. Aside from the break-ins and all those weird things happening, they wouldn't have been able to do anything. And then, like I said before, they will go to those great lengths. They will do whatever they have to get that psychological terror going in the mind of the target. It's freaky when people walk up to you and tell you maybe something that you were thinking about, or you're out on a drive in the country and you're trying to figure out a little problem and everything, and then somebody brings it up, that you don't even know. I've had that happen one time. I was because I used to drink a lot. I'll give you an example, guys, of some weird stuff, just for entertainment purposes, if nothing else. I used to drink. I had a pretty high tolerance, and I would like to, usually go out, but I didn't go. I don't like going to the bars. I didn't like that. And driving around while you're drinking in the city limits is pretty dangerous. And so I got into the habit of, I found a little, trail and this, little route that I could take outside of town, 15 miles or so out of town. And you could drive around out there, and you could drink a case of beer with your buddy or whatever, or your friends, and nobody would ever know. You could sneak back into town, and everything would be okay. Okay, I wouldn't recommend anybody do that. You don't want to drink and drive, obviously. But hold on, the cat's attacking me. But that's what I used to do. Boy, she is just freaking out today. Hold on, guys. I'm gonna have to take care of the kitty. Get over here, sweetheart. Come on. Stop it. There, lay down. Yes, you're a little baby. Yeah, you poor little thing. Okay. And so anyway, I would do that. And, getting back to the story, I met this one guy, and I used to hang out with him. And we went out and we were driving around. We were out there drinking. And there were some things that I was mulling through because I was dealing with this stuff probably, let me see, 2 or 3 years before I met him. But I didn't tell anybody. I never told anybody. I never, ever, ever said anything to anyone, ever. Oh, that's really the only thing I did right. Everything else I screwed up on the paranoia, looking at into the disinformation. But as far as just keeping your mouth shut, I never said anything to anybody. So there was no way when someone would say something to me that they would have a way of, connecting me to any of these things that I was dealing with, unless they had intimate knowledge of it with no sources or anything like that. And I've talked about the fact before that if you're going to tell people anything, if you're going to talk to somebody about this stuff, I would suggest you put disinformation in it as a protocol. So if you're attacked with street theater or directed conversations, that disinformation is in there so you know where it is coming from. Okay, because a lot of times it's not the clairvoyant, demonic type of street theater. Sometimes people will find out what's going on because people are talking about this stuff. And then what will happen is they will try to freak you out because they know you're paranoid or whatever. Like I've mentioned before, when people start talking about, being a targeted individual or advertising it or whatever, people in their neighborhood, maybe they're just having a bad day or maybe they're feeling cantankerous. Let's go mess with them. Let's do this, throw something at the house. You know, I've had, people that I've told in confidence have done that much. And then you get people trying to pull street theater on you, but it's got that disinformation in it. And you're like, oh, I know where you see they heard that from so and so, and they're just trying to, they're not perps, they're just idiots. They're just trying to play a game with me. I would recommend you do that. But this guy, like I said, we're out in the country, we're driving around, and he just comes out with some stuff, and he's looking at me, and his eyes were all dilated. In my opinion, it was demonic. Of course, we were drunk. And that's another thing to remember too. And I've talked about that when I made the video demonic gangstalking for I think it was Debik. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And I think his channel is not bad for a target or something like that. But anyway, you get around people who are involved or under the influence of a drug or too much alcohol. A few beers is fine. But I've noticed that when people, they get to a certain level of drunkenness, it's like they can be infiltrated or influenced demonically. Okay. Or they're on other drugs, like methamphetamines is a really bad one. And I talked about that in that video that when I got insomnia real bad and I started going through the withdrawals, that I hung out with people that were using methamphetamines because I didn't know what else to do. I was basically awake for months at a time and so on and so forth. So those are the type of people that I hung around with, and I was drinking a lot of alcohol too. But they were definitely influenced demonically. And when you get around people like that, especially in the crowds of individuals using methamphetamines, it gets really evil, where you're going to be dealing with those people at first, and it's like the experience that that people talk about when they first become gang stalked, that they're like, what the hell's wrong with all these people? They're crazy. You just think they're nuts. You don't know what the hell's wrong with them. And then you realize that, there's a bunch of them, and this whole thing is directed at you, and whatever's going on, they're literally hunting you down. But at first you don't know. Okay. But then of course, like I've talked about with the invasion, once you realize what's happening, then it starts to take its effect and you start noticing it. And this dude, he was, and he was one of those type of people that played around with methamphetamines too. So there was demonic activity in his life. And I dealt with that. We're out in the country. This dude starts doing that to me. And I'm like, man, this is, I just wanted to kick back and have some beers. What the hell? But that kind of thing will happen to you. And processing that information is important. Now, when people are attacked repetitively, okay, that's really when the reprogramming gets intensified. Okay, because you're dealing with multiple tactics. You're dealing with that guerrilla warfare. You're dealing with asymmetrical warfare. You don't know where it's coming from, and you're isolated. Okay, so like I said, with those examples that I gave before, when people, um, their life has changed. The person, maybe the girl is raped or assaulted or something, and now she's carrying guns and Doberman pinchers, and she's got huge spotlights up around her house, and everybody's like, man, she's paranoid. But no, I don't know, man. You got to know that when someone gets tortured and their life is threatened, it would change your life. But unfortunately, for targeted individuals, it's so covert and obfuscated that people don't know that you're not crazy, right? And so all these mechanisms are activated simultaneously. I'm going to go into the comments and see what's going on here because I've been rambling. Okay. Okay. And I'm probably skipping a lot of, hopefully, there's not a perp in here, but zombies. Let's see what's going on here. I don't know. Yeah, it's a real story. You couldn't make this kind of thing up. Why? If I was going to make up a story, I would definitely at least make myself the hero or something. Targets don't have that. I mean, you're the victim, and I'm not suggesting that people play the victim or accept a type of victim, mentality or anything. But you have to be realistic. And if I was going to make up a story, it wouldn't be like this. Okay. All right. Let's see what else is going on. Rise to power. Welcome to the live stream. Nicholas Boserman said he taught boxing. Yeah. Yeah. But, unfortunately, it makes you feel better that at least if something happens that you could fight, that's, but when you're dealing with all this stuff, these guys are cheesy and they'll try to break you down or they will wait for you to get in a vulnerable place. And that goes into some of the other gaslighting techniques is that, you're strong at first. And there was somebody, I can't remember what their name was, that was on the live stream yesterday that talked about their health being affected. And they will wait, you know. There's a 2-3 year period that you can be assaulted very heavily. It will change your health, man. Over that amount of time, for me anyway, I went from being, zero health problems to about the time, let me see, it was about 3 years later. I was basically hospitalized and I had liver failure from a lot of the stuff I was dealing with. Okay. No sleep. And by the way, when you sleep, your body heals just from the natural stuff that you're dealing with without, any of the other weird stuff that you're going to be dealing with, or the fact that you're not eating right, or, any of that other stuff, or the covert drugging and poisoning, and who knows what the hell they're using to attack you. And I've talked about that before, that you get into different tactics when you're dealing with that, because not only are you dealing with the obvious stuff, which I think a lot of targets will talk about street drugs and things like that because they can blame that on the target. Oh, they're doing drugs or whatever, whether it's the hallucinogenics or methamphetamines or ecstasy. I've heard a lot of targets getting that. They'll do a drug test and for some reason they'll test positive for ecstasy. A lot of these things, involve covert techniques that, I mean, even when you get into a case where people are, like a spouse is poisoning another spouse for an insurance policy or something like that, when they test for that kind of stuff, they have to kind of know what they're looking for. When they do a spectromatograph test or whatever to look for something, they got to kind of know what they're looking for. And they have different things that'll show up. But I've talked about the fact that when you're dealing with synergistic poisoning or other techniques, synergistic drugging, where you have multiple chemicals involved to gaslight the victim, they're not going to be able to figure that out. And even in the case where people are, given the things that are obvious, a lot of times they're diagnosed with health disorders or whatever because doctors don't want to look paranoid, right? The insurance company doesn't want to. Why do you think they're being poisoned? What kind of evidence do you think that gives you the right to do all these tests and so on and so forth? And there's disputes, and it goes into the hospital protocol, and they just don't want to do it. Let alone different chemicals that are reacting together synergistically that causes the victim to have anything from anxiety to organ failure. Okay. And, using that kind of technique is a good strategy because, it just depends on how you do it. You can gaslight the victim or you can obfuscate the activity in a way where no one's ever going to figure it out. Right. Even in the case where people are being poisoned with something obvious like, antifreeze or ethylene glycol, a lot of times doctors don't even figure that out. They just think it's kidney failure or something else, and they don't know, or they're diagnosed with some other disorder. You get a synergistic poisoning plot involved in the event of a targeted individual who, they might put something in your hygiene products and then put something in the food in your fridge. They might put something on the door handle of your dwelling or whatever, or they might fume you and then put something else, and that way, people can come over and they might even eat the food in your fridge or whatever. I didn't have no problems. Or they might invite you over to a dinner or set the target up in the case that it's a clandestine conspiracy and try to gaslight the target where everybody will eat the food, but the target was exposed to the other chemical, maybe in their hygiene products, or they fumed them or whatever they did. And now when they mix that other chemical that would be harmless, and they get it, that they get that in their system when they eat the food that everybody else is eating, they're going to have that reaction where it can become toxic, or they can have some type of effect that comes out of it. You're going to figure that stuff out. But getting back into the health effects, about 2-3 years into it, you're gonna be experiencing a lot of problems. Okay, so as far as being Mr. Tough Guy, it's not always going to work. Not to mention the fact that they can gang up on you in other ways too, and it goes right into that psychological terror that Adam talked about at the beginning of this. I'm going to go back into the comments. Okay, Nicholas Boserman says he was a good middleweight boxer. Right on. I never got into boxing really. Never got into that. I think the kitty's sitting on my reading glasses. Honey, what are you doing? Okay, that's all right. Okay, always in a group. Yeah. Okay. So Nicholas Boserman, you must have caught them outside your dwelling and they took off in a vehicle. Yeah, it's not uncommon for people to be caught in the act of doing something. Okay. I've had that happen several times, and a lot of people, they'll, especially new targets, well, why don't you call the police? I made that video, Gangstalking Crime Scene Evidence, one of the first videos on my video playlist. And, I've caught them in the act doing quite a bit, but they threatened me and said, hey, man, if you say anything, we're just going to, we got the neighbors involved. We'll have them tell the police that you were doing it. I literally caught them doing things to my water out there when I was living at the trailer. You have a water riser that feeds the trailer, and that goes down about 4 foot underground. And what can happen and that, because I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was having a lot of adverse effects that would hit me, 20, 30 minutes after I would get done showering. And it was rough, man. We're talking about huge drops of sweat coming off me. I was having a hard time breathing. My skin would burn. My eyes were burning. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was throwing up. I couldn't figure out what was happening. And it would be after about 20, 30 minutes after I showered, went to work. And on my days off, I didn't have the problem. I put it together and I'm like, how in the hell are they doing this? And I couldn't figure it out. And I quit using the water in my dwelling. and I was fine. And so I knew something was going on, but I couldn't figure out how it was doing. And one day I caught them out. They were getting underneath the trailer, and I went over to see what they were doing. They're like, "Oh God, well, we're fixing the plumbing for you." I was like, "Wait a minute, man! I'm responsible for the plumbing in this trailer. What are you talking about?" "Well, we just started checking stuff in the trailer court here, and there was a guy that was doing some siding and everything, and I went under there and looked, and there was all these bullshit stories surrounding this whole thing, which he told me himself that he was allergic to insulation and wouldn't be doing anything other than the siding. So he would have had to go past all the insulation to get under there, through the siding on the bottom, which was even more bullshit. Supposedly, they had saw at the bottom, 4 feet under the ground, that the water riser was squirting just a little bit. And so what they were going to do is tighten that up. And what they did was they shut the water off with the key, because you can shut it off. You got this long bar that goes down and hooks onto this little, key. It's a little knob, and you can turn the water off. And then, of course, you can take the water riser and open it up, because that is a big pipe that goes up, because they got to put it under the frost line. It goes up into the water feed that goes into the trailer. Okay, so what they were doing, they were filling it up with chemicals, and then they would hook the water riser back onto the feed and then turn the water on, and it goes right up into the water heater. Okay, but anyway, I'm sitting there talking to them, and they're like, "Yeah, well, we got it all fixed and everything." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that's a little odd," because there was a pipe above ground that was literally squirting water, right? And I had known about this thing for quite a while, because it was giving me trouble, because it would get the insulation wet. And in the winter, sometimes it would freeze, and I'd have to put extra heat tape around it. And I'm like, "Well, you guys aren't making a whole lot of sense. If you're going to notice that 4 foot under the ground to fix my water line, why the hell didn't you fix that right there?" And you could see it; it was squirting water. I said, "What you're telling me, it doesn't make any sense." And I confronted them right there, and they said, "Well, you go ahead and call the cops. You can do whatever you want, because the neighbors will just say they saw you under there." And I got the same type of confrontation later when I caught them digging up the whole lot, which I've got pictures of. What they did was they put a tube through the irrigation system of a sprinkler system the neighbor had put in, and they had jacked up the trailer and put the pipe or the hose through the cement pylons up in. They connected it up into the ductwork. Okay. And I was also threatened. Okay. These people already tried to kill me several times, you know. And at this point, I'm like, well, there's a reason why. First, the reason that the target individual shouldn't call the police, you don't know who's in on it. You don't. The second thing is, if a sloppy investigation gets going and they think they're going to get caught, they will kill you or shut you up. Who knows how they're going to do that? Because these people, they already, it's not like they care about you anyway, right? Because they're already torturing you, trying to drive you crazy and playing this game with you. You don't think they'll kill you? They will. If they think they're going to get caught, they will. So, the whole thing gets labyrinthian, and, trying to find help is another issue for targets, but you will catch them doing these types of things, and you can catch them red-handed. They'll either take off, or they're going to deny everything, or you just get threatened. And it just depends on what you catch them doing. Yeah, Steve Wells says, catch one of them alone, and they look down. Yeah, well, I have. I've done it. But at the same time, you got to remember that, I mean, think about all the stuff it depends on who you are. It depends on who's targeting you. It depends on what you're dealing with. But if you're one of those targets that's dealing with all this stuff, they seem to know what's going on in your life, right? Not only that, targets go on the run or whatever they do. It's like they're waiting for you. That they're not exactly, it's not like they're not prepared to play this game with you, first of all. So when you catch somebody doing something, they've usually kind of been interjected into this scenario, and they get cocky and they screw up. Either that, or they want you to catch them, They want you to see the obvious surveillance or something because that's just part of the technique. Or they're trying to bait you into saying something when they're not actually doing anything, and then they'll just say you're crazy. Okay, and that's another problem is that if you go, flapping your lips and telling everybody that you're the victim of a conspiracy, you're a targeted individual to people who are not going to believe it, and you get on paper or diagnosed or something, then it's really evil. So, well, getting back to when I was dealing with all this stuff, why didn't I say anything? Because if it went badly, guess what? I'm on paper as a Looney Tune, and they can get away with anything at that point, and they know it. They know it. That's not a good place to be as a target. Hi, Bora Bora. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've talked about the invasion. We talked about the trauma and the purpose of that is a complete invasion into the mind of the victim. By the way, there's no getting out of the effects of being attacked and gang stalked. Okay, the science that surrounds this type of harassment is undeniable. Okay, and not to mention the fact that the activity is obfuscated in a way where the victim is discredited, and they can just get away with it in plain sight, not including the things that the target has been sensitized and conditioned to where the activity is even more covert and obfuscated. Okay. Well, we've got 25 people in the live stream here. Okay. Well, I'm just looking through the comments. Nicholas Boserman says, when I stop freaking out, they stop messing with me so much. Yeah, reacting to the torture and the techniques is an incentive for them to keep doing it. And I've talked about that before. It doesn't matter what you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with, just harassment in the form of chain yanking, or, workplace harassment. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're looking for it, if you're reacting to it, if it's things that you've been sensitized to, that's the whole point. Confronting gang stalkers is futile, okay, because they want you to notice it. They don't care if you criticize them. They don't care if you call them brown nosers. They don't care if you're aware of it, and you want to let them know that you're aware of what they're doing. If they're using some type of covert technique that you're sensitized to, or they're playing real clever and using innuendos and stuff like that, they don't care. They want you to notice. That's the whole point of using this type of thing, because when targets are reprogrammed, they're reprogrammed in a way where now normal activities are going to be hindered by the obsession of the sensitized covert tactics that targets deal with. Okay, it's like the innuendos. It gets to the point where I've dealt with targets who have been hit with this stuff really hard, and I'll talk to them about something, and they'll freak out because they think I'm hinting around. You're messing with me. I've given this example before. I went over to a friend's house to play chess, and I had just gotten my blood test at the hospital. Okay, I went over there, and I still had, they put a little cotton ball, they put a Band-Aid on your arm or whatever, and I just left it all there. I didn't care. We're sitting there, we're playing some chess. There's a few of us there, and there was a guy there staying at his house temporarily, and I didn't know a whole lot about this guy at all. Okay, I didn't hardly know anything about him, other than he needed a place to stay, and he was just hanging around over there. And we're playing chess, and I said, "Well, I guess I can take this thing off. I look like a damn junkie." And I ripped the cotton ball off, and I threw it away. And this dude starts getting really agitated, and he starts moving around and jumping, and he starts, "Oh, so you think you're funny now, huh? Oh, And then he got up and looked like he was going to punch me, and I'm like, "What's your deal?" Come to find out, he had a problem with intravenous drug use, and he thought I was using it as an innuendo to attack him, right? I mean, this dude was ready to fight. I had no idea that he was, even someone who used needles or anything, man. You know, and it happened to me before. I was sitting around, the same guy. I mean, I had to quit going over to this guy's house. He's attacked multiple people. I think they finally got rid of him. But I started talking about my vehicle, and I'm like, yeah, I got to change something out in there. And then he started talking about some weird stuff where evidently the gang stalkers had convinced him that they were changing parts out of his vehicle covertly and replacing them with used ones or something, you know. And I'm like, dude, I don't even know what you're talking about, man. And yeah, you do. And they changed the engine in my vehicle. I mean, they literally drove this guy to the point where he was pretty much crazy, right? I believe he was a target. I believe he was dealing, with harassment, but it had nothing to do with me. And that's what they want. They want people to get to the point where, they're just reading into everything. And it literally hinders your natural activity to the point where you can't have a normal conversation. You can't have normal thoughts in your brain. You can't concentrate. You can't work. You can't live. You can't function. And that's ultimately what they want. Okay. Well, we don't have any more comments up there. You guys are still out there, aren't you? Okay. Okay. Well, I'm still getting notifications from this individual. And I've mentioned this before. Sometimes when you reach out and contact people from the channel, it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out for the better. Hopefully, I can iron things out. My gosh. Yeah, Nicholas Boserman says you pay so much attention to them that your life crumbles. Rise to Power says just listening. Well, at least it's entertaining. At least I've got everybody's attention, and I guess that's a good sign. When people are in a dialogue, I guess sometimes I would assume that I'm just boring and I'm not really entertaining people or capturing, their focus. But it's really when you get into some of these stories, that's when it does get interesting, especially from someone who's experienced gang stalking for decades. And there's a lot of examples that I could give. I try not to, um I don't know, I try not to freak people out or to, I don't know, play in to the paranoia that they've already got. But it's, if you're a TI, if you're a targeted individual and you're experiencing heavy harassment, you got to be aware of these things. It's not that I'm trying to, increase your paranoia. I'm just letting you know what I've dealt with. And as far as I know, they will go to whatever extent they have to accomplish the invasion into your mind, to accomplish giving you the mind virus of psychological terror so that you're worried about all the things that they could do to you and so on and so forth, because that's what they'll do. That's their main objective. And it is what it is. There's no getting around it. And it just depends on what you're dealing with. There are times where targets will the activity will decrease. For example, in the case of Nicholas Boserman, and I'm just guessing because I might not know this for sure. I could be wrong, but he's dealing with a lot of V2K still. Okay. So as far as people breaking into, his house and maybe doing things to him at night or whatever, they've, they've opted out of that and they've used the option of, voice to skull, whether it's technological or demonic. The harassment is constant, but it's not, I don't know, it's not the break-ins, it's just something else. So there's different things that different targets will deal with. Or there's another guy that pops in every now and again, and he said that he's actually, moved around and gone back to Michigan several times, according to the voice to skull or the demonic voices that he's experiencing, and it's something that he deals with all day long. Okay, and so it's a constant. type of toxic environment that they will create for the victim. And however they accomplish that type of terror, using that asymmetrical warfare, they're going to do that. But as long as they accomplish it, and you're going to be worried about those things. And I've talked about the fact that I live by protocols. It's really the only way I get around it. If I have to sit around and wonder if somebody's going to get in my house and do something to my food or whatever, it's not going to work out. I've already played these games. It's a lot easier for me to just go shopping and bring the food into the dwelling after work and just not deal with it. I'm not going to sit around and watch 2 hours of security footage or what. Not to mention it burns out the security system when you do that you do that every day, right? Of course, you can have different settings that you got motion settings and stuff like that, but it's still hard on the unit, and you can skim through it or whatever. But if it's not an issue, and if you don't have to deal with it, that's the best way to do it. Or using the hardware to lock the house from the inside to prevent people from breaking in, rather than to sit around and wonder if somebody's going to pick your lock while you're asleep. Okay, they're either going to bust the door down or they're not getting in. I mean, you eliminate the options that they have. Some of the time you're going to limit your options, but for the most part, if you develop protocols, you don't have to sit around and wonder what you're going to do. You don't have to sit around and try and figure out what they're going to do. You just do what you're going to do every day, and you make your life as simple as possible. That's the only way I've found that really works. Because if you're sitting around trying to figure out what they're going to do or trying to figure out how to stop them or whatever, you will become stressed to the point where you'll be dysfunctional. Let's go in here. Bora Bora says that someone banged on their door today, and then they'll do that. They like that kind of stuff. I had to disconnect my doorbell, right? Because they were doing that. Okay, along with the stuff that I've talked about before, if you've watched this channel, they were literally going under the trailer where I lived and waiting until I went to bed. And then they would hit the floor with a hammer, between 20 minutes and an hour after I would lay down. Scare the crap right out of you, make you jump, while you're in bed. You'd be like 2 foot off your bed. Loud too. Or they would come and ring the doorbell, right, and then take off running. It even got to the point where I had motion detectors and everything on the property. So what they just started running around through the yards to set the motion detectors off. Then when I got the cameras out there, it helped quite a bit. But they got around that and then just started throwing things at my dwelling, from another person's yard, off the camera. They would start throwing stuff, and people are aggressive, and they will do that. And it's what do you do? And then you get to the point, depending on what you're dealing with, that your life is altered in such a way where something legitimate will come along, and then you have to try to explain why it was that you didn't know, like with the doorbell or what. I mean, there was no getting around it. Even if you catch them, they'll just, I just thought I'd come over at 4 a.m. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, yeah. And if you tell people don't do something, that's another thing. If you get infiltrated, and a lot of times targeted individuals will deal with infiltrators, they will, whatever you tell them not to do, they'll just do it anyway. Right? You want to talk about futile? And, eventually you're going to be surrounded by these people. I've had people like that. It's like, don't do this, or before you come over, make sure and call me or whatever. And they'll just do it all the more. And pretend completely play stupid. Oh, how you doing? Oh, I'm sorry. And I've mentioned that before. If you're dealing with people that have to apologize to you on a regular basis, get them out of your life. Get them out of your life, man, because they're not going to stop. Okay. It's one thing to have, a character defect, or for people to mess up or give into temptation or whatever. But if you're around people that are doing that, you might as well just, get rid of them. However you have to do that, because they're not going to figure it out. Okay. And the fact that that it's a type of assault that is incremental for targets because all these little things add up. It's death by 1,000 cuts. You know, it's not just one area; it's everything. It's a type of environment that is created around the target. They're dealing with disinformation campaigns. They've got harassment from neighbors. They've got other things going on where their personal property is being attacked. They're getting workplace harassment. They're getting attacked by strangers in public places, at doctor's appointments, at dentist appointments, at the grocery store. They go to a restaurant, they experience food tampering. And then after that, they're just threatened. And, they deal with unorthodox techniques and behaviors that would suggest that somebody's going to do something, whatever. And it's an environment that is created around the target. And a lot of times, the goal, especially for some of you guys out there who have talked about, being physically able to, probably hurt someone, they might want that. They don't care if in the case that somebody's being paid to attack you, they don't care about those people. And I've mentioned that before. The people that are involved in this stuff are getting set up. You know, who's to say you're not going to do something? I've thought about it. I've come close. I've come real close to doing it. Okay. And it's not rocket science. That's taking a pretty big chance. Some of these people are really stupid, and the people that put them up to it, they don't care about them, you know. And, at the end of the whole thing, well, they might be screwed, but you're going to be screwed. And it's just not worth it. And they will do that. It's like, the old strategy. I keep getting notifications. Sorry about that. Where you get two people together, you get them to butt heads, and they destroy each other. Whoever is in charge of your harassment, they don't care about the perps. They don't care about you. They want to take you out however they can. And you have to remember that it's like a lot of people will talk about Myron May or the other people that go on mass shootings or whatever. Well, it's a non-solution scenario, but it is accomplished in the same way with that type of environment that is created around the target to build up the frustration, to build up the emotions, at a high enough level to manipulate someone into either hurting themselves or someone else. And it's death by 1,000 cuts. It comes from all the angles. And that's part of the obfuscation of this activity. There's so many little incremental ways that the target can be harassed that it's not only does it sound crazy when you try to talk about it, but it's everywhere. And it causes so much agitation and anxiety and frustration that it has reciprocity over time. I don't know if you guys can hear that notification. Can you? I'm tempted just to turn it on again. Okay, reading the comments. Mats and Miles, welcome to the live stream. I hear things outside my shop all the time. I just ignore it to let them feel safe till I have someone to coordinate with. I've thought about that. In fact, I contacted a private investigating firm one time just to see if I could have my dwelling surveillanced, get some surveillance done because there was people doing everything they were doing. They were banging on the walls. They were running through the yard. They were getting underneath the trailer. It was ridiculous, and there was no other way that it was, and I thought, well, what if I just paid for, a night because this was something that was happening constantly, how much is it going to cost me? A lot. It costs a lot of money, a ridiculous amount of money. Most of the private investigating firms, they will just say, well, we don't do that, but they'll leave the option open. We might be able to find somebody, but it's going to cost you. They like a lot of, they're doing that for the money. Okay. Hold on a second, guys. I've got to take a little break here. So I wish I could put some music on for you. Actually, I'll just turn on that notification again because this person seems to want to interrupt my live stream.